All right. So we met last month, and a lot of the people that are here were here last month, and we decided there was probably a lot more stuff to dig in with holds. And when it comes to holds, different setups can vary very differently with how the hold system works. So I think what I've discovered with discussions I've had previously with some of the people here, and then not some of the people, uh, is that we all kind of want probably different variations of various things. So I think it's good to have more discussions and try to see where is common ground or those type of things, because it's really hard to try to move this hold system in one particular direction when there's so many different needs. So that's kind of where I think the discussion needs to go a bit and share some of our different setups, some of our different challenges. But we're also hoping to continue this discussion next month at the Koha US conference. So there will be an in-person hybrid version of this meeting. So if you can't make it in person, you can still participate in that conversation. So I'll just kind of open up the floor and to whoever wants to talk about some of the issues they're having, some of the directions they would like to see holds move development wise.
Well, I can start off with what I've wanted for 11 years now. So when I was in Idaho and here in Kansas, we have 49 libraries. And when I was in Idaho, it was the same situation where some of those libraries are multi-branch libraries. So when I was in Idaho, the Latah County Library District had 7 branches. And then the Lewiston School District was a part of that consortium, and they had a high school, 2 middle schools, and I think 5 elementary schools. And the Asotin County Library had 2 branches. And so what we wanted was something like local hold priority, which local hold priority gives you options. I think you can choose, it says the first option is give or don't give priority to holds based on if the home library of the item matches the patron or its current location. There's like several different options there. I'd have to pull up the preference to say exactly. But what local priority has done is it's the way we have it set up here, where we only have 2 situations, where we have a school district with 4 libraries and a county library that has 4 branches. What we have local holds priority set up to do is say give priority to the patron where the home branch of the patron matches the home branch of the item. So if a patron at Baser places a hold on an item owned by Baser, it doesn't matter where they are in the hold list. The first Baser patron gets the first Baser copy, even if it has to jump over 50 other holds to get there. What we'd really like, though, for Donovan County, the way local holds priority works is that the first person at the Troy branch gets the Troy copy, even if there's somebody at the Elwood branch is above them. And so we'd like that local holds priority to have an option in there to say the people in this group give priority to anybody in this group over all the other groups. And then after all the people in this group are satisfied, we want it to move on to the other libraries that aren't a member of this group. And I can also see an advantage if we can say give people in this group priority based on the home branch, and then based on the other people in this group, and then based on everybody else. So I'd like enough flexibility to do both of those, where we can say everybody in this group is equal, and whoever's at the top in this group gets it first. And then I also like the ability to be an option there to say anybody at the home library, and then in the local group, and then the rest of the system. And I asked for that, you know, in 2012. And there's an open bug in the Koha community that I should have looked up before this meeting. And then I moved to Kansas, and it became less of an issue because there's only two situations like that in my current consortium. But NEKLS has still said if we can work on a development like that, we're willing to sponsor. Well, that was my previous boss. I said we'd be willing to sponsor up to 20% of that. I should probably check with my new boss to see if he's still on board with.
Yeah, go ahead and do that, George, because I can see Eileen unmuting, and it's just interesting. I've had this exact discussion with CLAMS. We've talked about that. What exactly the functionality you're describing is. I wrote kind of like a preliminary spec for that. I guess I think we found a bug that was in the system, and Juliet might have found it there that was close to what we were talking about, and I think I just added on a little bit. But or maybe this is it is possible. Oh yeah, no, this is one that we've looked at. So I definitely know that CLAMS and Click are very interested in that particular hold functionality.
This is the bug that that was discussed a long time ago.
But I think with CLAMS, maybe I'm misunderstanding George, but I want the home library to be, you know, that's the first stop for the hold. And if theirs is out, then it goes to a group. And then if that group doesn't have the title, then it goes to the wider consortium. So it's like a 3-tier thing.
Yeah, and I'd like that
group first. I don't want it to go to the group first.
I'd like that to be an option for people to have the ability to say, go to the group first or go to the home library first and then the group and then everybody else. I like there to be, and I think it can be written in such a way that it does that.
Yeah, but we definitely want the home library first. And then the other thing we would like, we're having a situation with one library, their circulation has gone right down because they have the item sitting on their shelf. Their patron wants it, and another library is filling that hold because it's appearing on their paging list. It's not that it's being checked in. We were used to that on our old system. That's fair game. If it's checked in at a different library, that's fine. It goes to the library even though there's an available copy. But what's happening is it's being paged. Michelle is investigating this, but it's been paged at another library when it's available at the home library. And then there's all this transport cost in getting it there, and the patron has to wait longer because they could just pick it up at the home library. So we used to have a thing on our old system, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Michelle, with the timing. It was this 72-hour pause that if we'll say somebody wanted a book to pick up on Nantucket and it was on their shelf, but another library opened up first before them, it would not appear on the paging list elsewhere until the owning library, the pickup library, their patron was given a 72-hour window to satisfy the hold. We would also like that pause feature. That was really helpful in cutting down things going back and forth. And I'm not sure what it was officially called on our old system, except it was a 72-hour pause.
Yeah, we've been having the same issue at our libraries where it's getting trapped and then.
And we thought originally, okay, but we were used to this on our old system that if it was checked in somewhere else, that activated the hold and it went to the other library, even though that library has it on their shelf. That's, we're used to that. So it's something more is happening in Koha that we don't want to happen, in that we think it's appearing on a paging list elsewhere when we don't want it there for 72 hours. And then there was one other thing about holds. It's a setting that that Bywater is advising us to turn on. What is that, Michelle? Do you remember? It's about real-time holds. It's a setting we don't have.
RealTimeHoldsQueue.
Yeah. Does anyone else have that? We're afraid to turn that on in case it makes things even worse.
We've been using it. The one trick that we didn't understand about it when we first turned it on was that if you are, and this gets to Stephen's question about how often does your holds queue run, the way we are doing it is things are randomized. And every time we rerun that holds queue, which for us is every 2 hours, it's like a shuffling of the deck and those holds move around. And not everybody operates that way, but that's how we do it. We needed to have something in the cron job force real-time's hold queue to still do that shuffling. Otherwise, it just would stick in the same holds queue and not move around. So if you are doing that randomized shuffling of where items go, which queue they go to, you just need to make sure that Bywater turns that piece on with the cron job. And then it's since we've done that, it's been working quite well for us.
So I think ours is running every hour, but we may have asked them to change it to every 2 hours. I can't remember. Michelle, do you remember? Why are you doing 3 times a day, Steve? I'm just curious as to the logic behind that.
I think it was, and unfortunately, I'm not the best person to be here, but COVID has wiped us out. So I am wearing many hats. And my ILS hat is probably my weakest one. But I believe it was because we were random. It was like a nightmare. Somebody, people were going to the shelves, pulling books, and then they'd come back, and those weren't the books that were on their pick list anymore. And it was just like, so it was really frustrating to our members because they were doing all this work and then it was going nowhere. So when we were like, okay, well, let's run it 3 times a day, and that way they can build workflows around it. So 8 to noon for the morning staff, noon runs again, re-randomized, and then 4 p.m. re-randomized for the evening poll crew. I'm wondering now that we are switched, we did finally load a transport cost matrix, which you saw my suggestion there of maybe an upload feature or something. I actually ended up getting Excel to write the SQL for me, and I sent Bywater the SQL, and I was like, please load this, which they did, so that was nice and easy, because otherwise that would have been, I think, 5,000 lines or 5,000 numbers. And I was just like, no, that's not happening. But it seems to be working well. I think the only problem now is, I'm not sure. Do we let it just run on the regular cron now, real time? Or do we, keep it at 8, noon, and 4, which, is probably less stress on the system. I mean, things don't move in the transport matrix, if I understand it right, because as long as you still have a copy, it's not moving on to another library unless you mark it lost or something, or not for loan. And the only thing that I think could happen is if a copy gets returned and it becomes available at a library that's before you in a library's queue in the matrix, it might shift up to them. But that's a question mark. I don't know.
The transportation cost matrix kind of takes a little bit of the randomization out if you have randomized hold queue weight turned set to be in random order. It kind of takes some of the randomness out of it, because it will only continue to randomize if you have 2 copies available at libraries where the transportation cost matrix value is equal.
Yeah, and we don't have that. We have it, everybody's a different number.
And
That's
if
what we were
everybody's a different
told.
number, then it's going to be completely random. It's going to
Or
completely
completely
destroy
not
the
random. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going
Yeah.
to completely destroy the randomness.
Right. And we were told not to do the same number within a column, I think within a column, because the danger would be that two libraries would get that item would show up in both. Let's say there were two libraries that are 15, that both of them would see that book in their pick list and both of them would go to the shelves. Or maybe we misunderstood that.
That wasn't my.
Yeah, I've never seen that happen. And mine's, I've basically only got like 5 numbers in there. So I've got like different steps and it bounces back between them in the steps. But I've never had duplication or people pulling stuff that they shouldn't be, like Eileen was talking about. I did have a question going back on that. Do you guys have the holds to pull list available where people can see it? Because that can cause that problem. The holds to pull list is going to show everything that needs pulled, whereas the holds queue is actually like giving you succession and making sure that people aren't stepping on each other's toes. That's one of the first things we did was hide that holds to pull.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah,
oh,
I don't
sorry.
know either.
That question was for Steve. What do we have, Michelle? I have no idea.
Well, we use the holds queue, and yeah, I run it every morning for all, just so I can get a copy of what's happening. And that's what one of our colleagues, Nancy, was brought up, that maybe that another library's pulling it for all, and then like actually like pulling things that are on other people's lists. So is there a way to like force people to only use their library? Or
I mean, I've got it. Yeah, I've got some jQuery where like when you click holds queue, it's already running it it pre-fills their branch code. So they're never it takes out an extra click. So it goes directly to their queue.
Jason, if you don't mind, we were actually thinking, because it sounds like you were, or it's before from the last meeting, it sounded like you were a little bit more like us in some ways, that we were going to reach out to you. I already reached out to Eileen because I'm curious to look at hers. Sounds to me from what you're saying that I put a lot of energy into assigning numbers that I didn't need to, but that's okay. You got to spend your Saturday night somehow.
Yeah, probably.
Talking about the holds queue, I actually encourage my libraries not to even use the built-in holds queue report. And I've been doing that for years because, you know, when I was at the Latah County Library, we had at one of our libraries, we had volunteers in the morning and in the afternoon. That was a volunteer task, was we would give them the holds queue list and send them out to pull the things that were on hold. And up until a couple of versions ago, you couldn't print out that built-in holds queue report because it included patron names. So the way that I got around all that, I put a button on the front page that says holds queue. Of course, I'm at NEKLS where there's 0 items. Because we only have like 100 items in our collection. But if we go to another library, you know, it says holds queue 9 items in there, and they just click this and it runs a report. And it gives them, and this is my priority holds report. So it'll tell them things that say highest priority means that that's a hold. This is a request for a pickup at this library, or it's an item level request. And anything that says high priority, that means that that's the only copy. And if it doesn't say anything, then that means multiple libraries have it. But this is also can be reformatted, and I've got a couple of libraries that I've got it reformatted so that this will print out on a receipt printer so that they can print it from the circ desk without having to switch printers.
Yes, that's what our libraries wanted, to be able to print it on a receipt printer. They told us to hide the holds to pull. So we are hiding that, and so they're only using the holds queue
Yeah, that's good.
aging list.
But then how are they seeing other places holds? I don't
Because
understand
you
that.
choose all as for the location. So that's why I'm wondering if, yeah, maybe they're doing all. If there would,
I'm sure that one of us, either maybe Jason or I, could come up with some jQuery that wouldn't give them the ability to select all.
I put my jQuery in the chat for where it swaps out the link so that it's directly going to their queue when they click Hold queue in the menu. They can still filter to all on the left after they've run it, but that's less likely to happen. Like if they're getting presented directly with their page of stuff, they're probably not gonna go fiddle with it as much.
awesome, thank you.
I think somebody mentioned the idea of having the holds queue pass it on to another library if that library doesn't fill it after a few days. And that's really what we would like, because we have some small libraries that are really distant and they have to drive a few hours to get to us to deliver books. So sometimes they just don't fill a hold for a couple weeks. And if it's on theirs, you know, if they're higher priority than somebody else, that book just sits there waiting for them to fill it. And I think that's our biggest struggle we're having with our holds queue right now, besides the fact that we just recently had a whole bunch of courier problems. So we have a whole bunch of really old holds now that we're not sure whether the patron still wants them or not.
So that's why we do the random thing, is because it will, as long as there's multiple items on the record, it will just move through until somebody eventually fills it. So that's kind of our approach. Are you doing that random approach, or is it just sitting
No, I think we were having a lot of the small libraries were feeling like they were filling holds that the bigger ones could have been filling because of that randomization. So we did actually go to the transport cost matrix so they would be further down on the list, hopefully.
But you're saying we can do both, though. I mean, essentially.
Yeah,
so
so
if
that
we've
might be,
got,
yeah,
I think that's the secret sauce. It sounds like.
Yeah, so
and
what
we
you
do
would
have
want,
the same numbers in some of the libraries have the same numbers in the row. Maybe it's just tweaking out that transport cost, but it would also help to have it move on after a period of time too.
yeah,
We're having, sorry.
I was gonna say, I think if you have values like Jason has, where there's just a limited amount and they're shared, my understanding is when those values are equal, that's where the randomness would come into play. Is that right, Jason? Yeah.
Yeah, so our holds queue regenerates every 15 minutes, and we have it set so the library has to be open, and we have it set to randomize. So if they have the same numbers, so if I've got like a bunch of 2s, it's gonna bounce every 15 minutes between the open libraries that day until somebody snags it. We do have occasionally an issue where somebody will pull something and somebody else has already pulled it, but it's very rare. It used to happen a lot more when we weren't running it as often. Like we used to run it every hour, and people would overstep on each other's toes more often than they do when it runs every 15 minutes. We haven't turned on real-time holds queue because I'm scared of it. So I'm still waiting for it to like really get stable before we do that. But like our setup has worked for us for quite a while.
Okay, because that's what I wasn't entirely sure if it would reassign based on the transport cost matrix every time it did the holds queue update. We actually have the real-time holds queue on because I only have 13 libraries, so I haven't seen any impact on it, except that it does run a holds queue update like multiple times every minute. So it seems like it's doing a lot. So if you have more libraries, I would be wary. But yeah, I'll have to look at my transport cost matrix then and see if there's anything I can edit.
Well, you have the opposite problem to us, Juliet, as I understand it. It's our small libraries that are complaining. They may not be open as often as other libraries in the same town, they feel they're getting the circulation. The small libraries are not getting a chance to pull their holds. So I don't know, Michelle, if we have the open or close time tied into the holds. I mean, maybe, yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah, and us as we're the largest library in our consortium. And so we only run our report that includes all of the other libraries' requests once a week. We have used the holds queue and we run a SQL report off of that, and we exclude all of the requests from the other libraries except on Tuesdays. And so that way that gives them a chance to pull their holds.
What Jason had mentioned, I think if we changed it to 15 minutes, because right now I think it's running every hour. So if we changed it to 15 minutes, the smaller libraries that were complaining to us that they're fulfilling holds that have already been checked in, they wouldn't be stepping on each other's toes, like you said there. So we should try that, moving from an hour to 15 minutes to see if that helps with things that are appearing on people's lists that have already been fulfilled. I will try that.
Jason,
that's a question. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just curious because we actually went the other direction for that same problem. We went from 1 hour to 2 hours, and we just tell staff that, you know, we do it on the even hours. So have your process, have everything checked in before that next list repopulates, because we were having people start, you know, and not finish. And then it was jumping over to another holds queue. Somebody else had pulled it, and by the time they went to check it in, the other library had processed the hold. So that's why we went to 2 hours. So I guess I'm curious how the 15 minutes thing is.
Yeah, I mean,
would avoid that.
I thought that would make it worse, Michelle, rather than doing it less often. Wouldn't that give the bigger libraries, like they'd be running it every 15 minutes? That might make it actually worse for the smaller libraries. I don't know.
We only require our libraries to run the holds queue once a day that they're open. So I think that's the other piece that comes into play. So like I do have libraries that run it obsessively because they like to do that. But for the most part, we have it where we here are filling a bulk of the holds. Our larger libraries are filling the holds, but we're set at 0 or 0.5 or whatever, so that everything comes here first that we can fill, because we have the staff and the collection to do that. So a lot of that is tampered by that as well, I would say.
So
I don't know. I guess it's worth trying. Yeah.
About the holds queue. So if because I've been looking at and monitoring the temp holds queue table to get a sense of the load balancing in the system and how successful we were with our matrix, which not too shabby for the first time, but there's still a few anomalies going on in there that we'd like to tweak. But anyway, if a hold is set for, let's say, library A, and library A is supposed to pull item X, and I go over here in library B and I check in an equivalent copy, it's going to try and trap that to fill the hold, even though. So that is why you would want to run in the holds queue more frequently. I get it now. Okay. Oh God, this is complicated. That's why we all make the big bucks, right?
I thought it was for the glory that we did this, but you know.
Yeah, the warm fuzzies are what they pay me with. What are you guys getting?
Yeah, and then as complicated as it is, we also want to add these new functionalities to give us more options to make it even more complicated. But that's
I'm not
the nature.
new to Koha. When I worked with Dynex in the 1990s at Boise Public Library, there was a system in place. This is before Circe and Dynex merged. That version of Dynex, which was all text-based, it was all on VT220 terminals and in a Unix-based system. It was all, there was a system built in to say that the things that the 3 Boise branches got priority for the Boise patrons, and it all worked like that. And it was, I mean, they had the logic of it worked out pretty good. And that was back in the 90s. And Koha still hasn't figured that out. I don't know that Circe Dynex does that. I think that based on the conversations I've had with people using Symfony, I don't think that they managed to get that logic moved over from Dynex to Symfony and their later products. So I don't know. Dynex was a good system. You just had to like the green letters and the black background.
There was just a lot of money spent on that, George. You know, you've got to remember on those old proprietary systems, they were huge. So the logic can be put in, but there's a lot of work goes into, I think holes are probably the most complex part of any LMS. And it just depends where you're prepared to spend the money.
Yes. I did add a link to that PriorityHoldsQueue report on our NEKLS GitHub site. That's the one that it will put the holds that are for this library, for a patron at this library at the top of the list, and so on, the one that I showed you there.
I really like the idea of using a report rather than built in, where you could do stuff like that and say, you know, you're the only copy in the system, that sort of thing, for libraries that might get a volume that day that's not going to happen. They could at least, you know, prioritize the stuff that they really ought to prioritize.
The reason that we have that report is because, you know, the Northeast Kansas library system covers 14 counties along the Nebraska and the Missouri border here. And even though we're only 14 out of 105 counties, we have like 44% of the population of the state of Kansas. And we have a group of libraries from Leavenworth, Lansing, Basehor, Bonner Springs, and Tonganoxie that are all in a row, and they're all on the same courier loop. And the courier, we have a system-wide courier that is part of a statewide courier system. And the volume of traffic between those 5 libraries in particular is so great that they tend to not stress the things that they have to ship, because the couriers often cannot fit all of the materials into their vehicles in one trip. So they try to focus on the things that they need for their branch, and then they focus on the things that only they can fill at other locations, and the things that get moved to the bottom of the priority are things that other libraries could fill. Unfortunately, the situation more often than not is that the things that other libraries can fill are things that can be filled by the other libraries that are also in the same boat that they are.
But I mean, the other problem it solves for us, and I can't remember what it is, but I know that our libraries are complaining that there's some information that they're used to seeing in a holds queue that doesn't show. And if we secretly replace it with some JavaScript sauce, then done. You know, we can give them whatever we want. And apparently we can make barcodes magically appear on the screen because you're super fancy. So I will be stealing that.
The reason that I originally created a SQL-based holds queue was because that way I could hand it to a volunteer and it didn't have any patron information on it. But then I learned how to add the barcodes, and I learned how to do the priority. And then I don't know how many of you might remember this. Jason might remember this. He's been around a long time. There was a bug where things that should be on the holds queue in one version were not appearing on the holds queue. And that was a long time ago. That was probably in 2013 or maybe 2014. There was a bug that prevented things. If there was only one copy available, it wouldn't show up in the built-in holds queue report.
I think it was happening when we started Koha. So.
Yeah. And so I wrote something that would figure out what those items were that weren't making it to the regular holds queue. So, but there's a lot you can do with SQL that you can't do with the built-in report. So the built-in report is better now that you have control over which columns appear. But when it was just the original report, it was just
when we have some ordering put in so that it'll put all of their books in order so that they can search the library in that specific order too. So you can do that. That's kind of fun to do. I was wondering if you guys could confirm how when you trap a hold works. I was thinking this is the way. So when a hold is trapped at a library, when it's checked in, then it switches from being a bib level hold to an item level hold. And so then at that point, that's why if somebody else checks in another copy of the item at any library, it doesn't fill that hold anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, once a hold is filled, if you hit the ignore button, then nothing would happen.
Right.
But once you fill that hold, then it gets associated with that particular item. So it can't be filled by anything else.
So we just installed up the queue. Okay, yeah. We just installed a smart bin from FE Technologies, and it automatically traps the holds when they're checked in. And so if we want to ignore it, we end up having to cancel the hold and start it all over again. But I know there's a way to turn off trapping with SIP, but we have another software that we do want it to do. But I just wanted to make sure that that's right, what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go ahead.
Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was just I have a different topic, but it just I'll make a note. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was a completely different system I worked at. It was not Koha that had like the conveyor belt, and it would just move. It wouldn't activate holds, but it would just move anything with that into a particular pile, and then somebody would manually process those. So that seems like a good level of functionality, so you could take care of those individually and in the way
we didn't have the space for the conveyor belt, so basically what we have is just one bin that checks everything in when it's dropped in, which is really cool, but it's kind of hard to sort the stuff back out that we need to find.
Right.
So warning for those among us who are new. So we just had a member who was told by some construction company that you no longer have access to this room starting tomorrow. They call us in a panic and they're like, what do we do? Because we're not going to be able to fill holds on these books, et cetera, et cetera. So we're like, all right. So we've got a storage not for loan status that's not holdable, et cetera, et cetera. So we basically took every book that was in that location and changed the status to not for loan as storage. Well, some of those books were already traveling around and got into holds. Here's what happens. They fill the hold just fine. They get checked out to the patron just fine, but the hold doesn't go away. So little bug there. So the patron will get their hands on the book, it'll be just fine, but they will still have a live hold sitting in their system, oddly enough, on the same barcode. So just something to keep in mind if you're ever in a situation like that, which, you know, there's never any floods or anything in libraries, right? To keep an eye on it. We just ran a report, found them all. It was a short list. I changed them by hand or deleted the extra holds by hand, and it was fine. But that was a funky one.
Yeah, I would think like if something like that pops up, you could do what you did and apply it to that whole library, and then you could run a report of everything that library has in transit and then pull it off.
Undo it. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that
That's
but
true.
I wouldn't have thought about that until, you know, you run into the problem. But
Right.
that would be probably a good way to do it. We sometimes have that issue with when schools close for the summer and they already have, we try to get them to stop resource sharing well in advance of sending out their last bit, so that doesn't happen. But we turn off their holds, and then but there's a hold on there, and then it doesn't activate properly, so I have to like do some stuff that is way longer than the normal process of just checking it in. So that is a more predictable one that doesn't account for floods and things like that, though.
I think I'm looking at Juliet's link there. I think what it was is that the holds were already trapped. And so like these are things that were probably sitting on the shelf waiting for users from at other libraries, or even that library from the patron at the when we made the change to not for loan status. But I think your idea, Bob, of just like grabbing everything where they're either in transit or the holding branch doesn't match the home branch and change them back would be an easy way to do it, or exclude them in the first place from the change.
Right. Any other questions or things that really bug you about the way the holds work? I know that for us, I kind of was mentioning it a little bit there, but we just have an issue with we've been using branch transfer limits, which I highly discourage anybody from using, particularly the more branches you have, to try to handle that situation, to create a situation where you can turn the holds off for the library so they can't request, but you also need a way to turn it off so requests don't come in. So that's what we've been doing. I am hoping that there is I've been talking with Lucas at Bywater about a way to do some jQuery where we can remove the pickup location as an option for libraries. So it would not, so those requests could not go through, and it would still allow like a school to request their own stuff amongst themselves for a period before they close. But we might also just tell them once resource sharing is off, you can't use the system. But hopefully there's a jQuery solution. I've been through a long odyssey to try to get rid of our reliance on branch transfer limits because it's so unwieldy. And I'm like 95% there. So that's one of our big issues. But I think it's really unique to our setup. So I haven't found anybody else that's like, yeah, we're having the same problem. Thus,
I think we use it in some cases, but we're doing, because we use Aspen as our catalog for patrons, and Aspen, you can actually do stuff like that, that'll layer things on top of the Koha permissions.
That's on my long time wish list, is just simplifying how that all works. Like, why can't we have somewhere in each branch's setting that's like, can you place consortial holds? Yes, no. Can you place local holds? Yes, no. And just turn those on and off for each branch without all the convoluted stuff it takes to close a library.
That is a different approach, because I got a kind of, they haven't wanted to move forward, but I did get kind of like a more detailed scenario from Bywater, and they had a real complex thing going into that, just having like a button on that in the library setting would be a way simpler and more elegant solution to what they were proposing.
That's been talked about before, just if there was a button on the library, a checkbox in the library management where you could just check a box that says this library is currently closed. And it stops requests from going to their holds queue. It makes their items invisible in the OPAC. It removes all of their pickup locations as optional pickup locations. This is a sample of the jQuery I use when one of our school libraries is closed for the summer, that I put in the chat box there. And it just reroutes it to the library, to the public library in that community, if somebody selects it while the school is closed. But that's been discussed since
yeah, and I
early
know
on.
we've had that discussion, and that would be certainly helpful. I think what Jason just brought up, which kind of deals with our situation, is there's those periods where where a library may, particularly a school library, may want to fill local holds but not consortia holds, and that gives a little bit more nuance there.
Yeah, it does.
And that would be super helpful. And then additionally, having the ability to do all that closed stuff would be amazing.
You know, I've had libraries, I had a library this year that closed after a pipe burst on Christmas Eve, and they had to close for 3 months while they had their carpet replaced and had the wall fixed. And it would have been nice just to be able to click a button and say this library is closed. But instead there's like 50 bazillion steps.
Couldn't you do that? I mean, the way we used to do that in Sierra essentially was putting in days closed for them. So we would essentially close them in the system.
Yeah, and
whatever period.
That still allows patrons to pick that location as a pickup location when they place a request. I mean, you can do that in the calendar in Koha. You can just say this library, and that's one of the first things I do when a library says we need to be closed for whatever reason, is I go in and I mark those days as closed on their calendar. And then when the closure starts, I go in and I make sure that people can't choose them as a pickup location. And there's just a whole list of steps that I should probably have a checklist for, but I do have a checklist. It's just all up here. But
oh, look, the smarty pants from my organization's here. I can shut up now because he understands how things work. Hi, Mike.
Yeah, I like the suggestion from Mike. Actually, it would definitely rework the whole structure of the of circulation rules, which could be a complicated development. But we do have a few of our libraries love to have a Circ Rule for every scenario possible, and it just is so unwieldy to manage and keep track of, and it's so easy to have holes in the setup with the way it currently is. Yeah, want to exclude one patron category. Yeah, so then you're listing out all those other things potentially. Yeah, and then once you set an all rule for a patron category, you inevitably have to put in all those exceptions as well. Yeah, it's yeah, I don't think I have a clear picture in my head of the solution for that, but it would be, there's probably a way to do it that would make, when you're using lots of patron categories, way easier.
Can I ask a question about the loan rules real quick? Is there to what extent is the number of loan rules impacting performance?
I think that's theoretical, because that was a thing we were looking at as a possibility for CLAMS when they were having performance issues, and I think they reduced a lot, but that wasn't the problem.
Right.
So I actually haven't seen it impact performance, but
okay,
I could see the potential of it doing so, but I just haven't seen it yet.
How many loan rules do people have? Just curious, because we're thinking of dealing with a particular situation that does involve, we call them local use only patrons. So they might pay $20 and they get a vacation card, just like CLAMS, and they're able, because we're both vacation destinations, and they're able to use their library, but they're not allowed to use other libraries. They're not allowed to place holds on other libraries' materials, but we would love them to be able to place holds on their library's materials. But that would be, factoring that in via the loan rules in Koha would be a lot.
Yeah, we have everything from like a school library where they have just a single default policy to there being like 60 different lines on there because they have so many different patron categories that they want to have separate rules for. So we're really mixed with that, and I always try to discourage that, just because I say, as somebody that's administrating this for you, it's a lot easier if you don't have such a complicated list, but that doesn't always dissuade people.
I make sure to let my libraries that only have 1 or 2 rules know that I love them a lot and that they should keep their circ policies the way they are. I ran a dump of our rules table, our circulation rules table, and there's 22,000 lines. So
the rules table.
Yeah, it lists like each line as a
Oh, so the table in the
row.
database.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
A lot.
It sounds like a lot, but it's really not.
No.
Because it's including other stuff besides what's in the proper circ rules table, I think.
My experience in Consortia working with the circulation rules is if you get all the libraries, all the library directors in one room, and you say, we should make all the rules the same at all the libraries, they will all say, yes, so long as they're exactly like the rules we have right now.
Yeah.
Everybody wants the rules to be the same, but they want them to be the same as ours.
There is no point in, yeah, we call it the toothpaste is out of the tube and it's not going back in. People want their own setups.
I wish Christopher was here from Coeur d'Alene, because he kind of worked with everybody in his consortium, and I think they are all on like 1 or 2 sets of rules. He was just, they've only got like 26 libraries, so that's easy.
We have a group of prison libraries on a separate server, and they all are on the same rules, which is nice, much easier to administer. I actually have something I absolutely have to go to. I don't want to end this conversation though, if people still want to chat. So I am going to make somebody, well, George is the first on my list.
I have to go to a physical therapy appointment in about
I will make
15 minutes.
Jason the host.
You have to respect the international symbol for not it. Come on. No, that's fine.
And I'm going to go ahead and get going. But again, we will have an opportunity to discuss this more. And based on the attendance, I think we are going to switch to an every month meeting. It just seems like it's there's enough momentum and we're not running out of things to discuss. So that will be reflected on the calendar. And I will continue to send out agenda reminders. So it's been great talking to all of you. I will hopefully see a lot of you in person and the rest of you online in a month.
Thanks, Bob.
See you later, Bob.
Bye, Bob.
Thank you.
I put a link to a bug in the chat regarding circulation rules. My predecessor at this job started a development with Bywater that's at that first link at bug 15521. And it's got a corresponding wiki page to go with it, because there was a lot of discussion about it, and some of the things that were discussed became part of Koha and some of them didn't. But the plan was, what Heather wanted was, she wanted to take the circulation rules from being a table, this wide, and essentially make it into a batch of things that was like, that tall. But one of the things that was a part of that has dropped out of the discussion as things went along was a way of identifying rules that were redundant and duplicates. That's something that I think would still be a wonderful thing to have, to say, as you put in a new rule, if something could say this rule is redundant based on this other all rule that affects it, or this other rule, because there are plenty of ways that you can end up with redundant rules. I know at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a hard time turning on. We had a hard time with a couple of issues, because we had tons and tons and tons of redundant rules, not just circ rules in that big wide table, but some of those lower down rules were redundant and repeated at branch across branch across branch, when just having an all rule for the whole system would have sufficed. So, and unfortunately, like Bob, I've got to leave. So I've hurt my back and I've got a physical therapy appointment, but it's good to see everybody, and I'll see you all in Portsmouth, hopefully.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to knock off as well because it's the end of the day now in Europe. I'm going sailing.
Ooh,
Enjoy.
great. Have fun.
I had a quick question for those of you that are multi-library consortiums. Does each library have their own library account for a patron, and do you allow patrons to check out at other libraries? Because that's what we're working on, is trying to decide how much of that reciprocal we want to include. We're working on a grant to maybe allow our patrons to go to any library. We don't do that at this moment, but I was just wondering how your libraries handle that.
We share everything, basically, except, you know, certain library of things that we don't want going in delivery, that are not suited for delivery. But other than that, Michelle, we share everything across the consortium.
Do your patrons have just a single account then, and they can check out at any library, or?
Yeah, the only exception is our one community college. They have a college card. And then if they want to use a public library, they have a public library card. Okay. But other than that, the one card they can use anywhere. Except
same as Eileen here in Rhode Island.
Except for certain databases that are for the library patron only. You know, if the library buys databases, that's based on, I think, the barcode prefix.
So I put our policy manual in there, Juliet. We have our first policy in there is one patron, one account, and it talks about that exactly, and the exceptions we came up with, and how to procedures to deal with multiple accounts, because we do often have where we're migrating a library in and they've already got an account in Seek and Find in their old system, so we have to go back through and dedupe and merge and all that. So yeah, that you can look through my policy manual, but that is one that we've written down.
We do the same thing with Black Gold, because we have 7 different libraries. The exceptions are library of things have to be, anybody can check them out, but they have to pick them up and drop them off at the library they belong to. The other big exception is like our Hoopla stuff, because it's the library has to pay for it. If you don't have the prefix code for that particular library, you can't check out those items. So there are some restrictions. It's usually tied to who pays for it at that point, but books go back and forth all the time.
Okay. Yeah, we try to keep it one patron per library, but I know we have a lot of weird things. Like our county allows patrons to use a card at any, like Hill City can come and use their card to check out here, but the county next door, Piedmont Library, is not allowed to use their card to check out here, but they can have our stuff sent to them. And then we have another county where each library has their own card for a patron, but the patron can get a card at every library. So I think that if we're going to move forward with this grant, that's going to be a big thing of making sure that we just have one account for every patron. And then we might be able to reduce our circulation rules by quite a bit too, once we figure that out.
Yeah, not like in the state of California, you're supposed to be able to walk into any library and get a library card regardless. The state library has made that a rule
it's
overall.
the same in Massachusetts. They get state aid, and if a library refuses to unless they're what's that thing, decertified libraries?
Decertified.
Yeah, but you know, I could go into a Minuteman network library and I'm supposed to be treated the same.
Yeah.
Ours is basically county based. Each county is kind of a district, or it's all over the board across our state. But if somebody can't be served by a local library, then the state library serves them. we're really rural for a lot of our libraries in South Dakota.
Yeah, and that's sort of the niche that the regional library systems fill in Kansas, is like, we're here to serve the people that don't have libraries in their town. That's how we're funded. But yeah, as far as the one patron, one account thing goes, we weren't that way originally. So like when we first came on to Koha back in 2008, we had everything walled off. We had independent branches on. So everybody had their own accounts. Everybody was walled off from everybody, and it worked for a time, and then the sharing broke, and so we had to blast it wide open. And we found that having it wide open where there is just one account is a boon to the patron and a boon to the libraries, because like we've got people that bounce around and they'll rack up fines and stuff, and like they can't do that in Seek and Find. And then we've still got some outlier libraries that aren't in the consortium, and those people get really frustrated that they can't use their card at the Seek and Find libraries and stuff. So it's just simplified a lot, and it's made service to the patrons better, I think.
Well, just to clarify for CLAMS, the patron from outside the immediate area has to get a CLAMS card to use the CLAMS system. I know at other networks in Massachusetts, they can use their own card to use the system, but our system couldn't handle that. So we don't take a card from the Minuteman library and check out things on it. They sign up for a card.
Yeah,
it's the same as Black Gold. They're allowed to get a Black Gold card, but they can't bring their library card from wherever they're at and use it.
So talking from Vermont, we're all fiercely independent libraries, and so we each have our own patrons. We don't share them across libraries at all. It's mainly a funding thing because we also get no funding from the state. So we just have individual patrons.
Well, our libraries have individual patrons, and that comes into play when they're getting state aid. But a patron from Library A can use the resources at Library B. So they do all have registered patrons at their own libraries. And then you get some patrons jumping ship to another library because Library B has databases that Library A doesn't have. So that happens. But we don't encourage libraries to poach other patrons.
That sounds like kind of what we want to do with our consortium eventually, is to have everybody have their own patrons, but share and be able to use the cards at each branch.
Yeah, and for us, largely the home branch, the only important thing about the home branch, aside from statistical reporting, is where the home library defaults for hold pickup. Like, because we base everything based on the transacting location, where the patron's standing is where the rules that are followed. It's who's responsible for getting the items back. Like, as soon as they walk in your door, they're your patron until they walk out your door. But for statistical purposes, we do rely on the home branch that's set in the, and for like Hoopla, like you were mentioning, we have to restrict some things that way. Yeah. But for the most part, it's wide open.
We run into a lot of, because our communities are very close together, there's a lot of commuting that goes on. Somebody will live in one library district and work in another, and they want to be able to drop their books or pick them up. And that has always been a challenge. It's been a little bit more of a challenge because we had 2 libraries leave the consortium, and they're like right next to consortium libraries. So it's been a year and we are still getting phone calls as to why doesn't my card work in this system anymore? So that's been a bit of a challenge, and explaining to them that they are no longer part of the consortium and that they have to go to their own library website to get their books and stuff. So that can be a challenge if you have people that aren't a part of the group that exist really, really close.
All right, well, we're 8 past the hour now. Is there anything else y'all want to talk about today? We can, of course, continue the conversation next month at the conference?
It'd be interesting. I mean, I know, what was it, at conference, we want to talk more about holds, right?
I think so, yeah.
I wonder if a future topic when we've exhausted holds would be circulation rules. Because that's definitely just throwing that out there as one of many possibilities. But I know it's something that we're looking at. I mean, the way we crammed some of those in is I basically did the equivalent of a copy and paste. I went through and talked to Mike about what he wanted done in there. And I just wrote up all the SQL to do all the inserts into that circulation rules table and send it into Bywater as a ticket to make, I don't know how many, dozens upon dozens of rules, I think. But I think we might have, I don't know. I don't know if we have too many or not, or if too many rules is Bigfoot or what.
Yeah, I think that's one of something that should drive this group is simplifying this sort of stuff for Consortia. So like, I mean, like George shared that bug about simplifying the strike-bind rules. I think that's stuff that we can take as a group and hash over and try and like come up with better user experience surrounding that stuff. Because like it's nuts how, I mean, it works for a one branch library, easy. Sure, you've got your one set of rules, but for us, where you multiply that by however many branches you have, it's borderline insanity at certain points. So yeah, I agree. I think we should bring that up. I think we should try and come up with ideas to make it smoother, better, make our lives easier for sure.
Well, weird question. I think last time I talked, it was one of those things that came up and it just sort of flew by. Do people allow their members to create and run SQL, like Koha reports?
No, I'm the one and only for our consortium.
Wow.
We provide reports that we've written or Bywater has written for us, and we've tweaked them, and they can run those. But
they can run them, but they can't write them.
Yeah, and there's been pushback. Some eager beavers want to write them, but I know our systems manager, Brandon, there was some reason why we would not allow them to do that.
Interesting. So we did, because like in Sierra, create reports was like, I mean, it was like everybody's favorite candy cabinet, to go in and play. And I was like, I don't think we can take this away from them. And it's been interesting. I'll tell you, I have been really, like, it's warmed my heart as many of our members that are jumping into the SQL reports wiki, trying stuff out. Some of them actually succeeding and doing fine. Some of them asking us like little SQL questions about how to tweak this or that, but they're doing it. And it's kind of cool.
Yeah, there was some security reason interfering with APIs that made us hesitant. But the last time we met with our Bywater support people, I think they said that those are now protected in Koha, that they couldn't break the Patron API or something like that. I don't know. But when it was open in error, we had somebody, write over one of our reports or something. Something happened that we're like, okay, that's it. So we would like better, that if Library A wanted to do their own SQL, that they couldn't interfere with the central site SQL. So, I mean, that was an ability in our old system in Createless and with Innovative, that you could lock down a report so nobody could overwrite it. So we would like that. I mean, I would like them to be able to do their own, as long as they weren't interfering with everybody else's. But I do think it's something we have to talk about internally again. Because I don't like limiting them. I mean, we have to have a good reason to limit them. But first of all, to protect everybody else's report.
If they know how, they can pull anything out of the system. So
they can.
We have had that happen before. So it's something that has happened. So you couldn't Sierra, you couldn't run a report on, you know, all of the bibs or whatever. So we had some way of limiting things, and we can't in Koha. So until that happens, I am not okay with them being able to pull out an entire patron database and create their own, you know, or API keys and all of that. That is very prominently, you can see.
We don't want them to interfere with the functioning of the system that we've taken a lot of time to set up. So I think it goes to the underlying issue and difference between Koha and Sierra is that their permissions need to be more granular in Koha, and they're not. And it's something that it's a thorn in my side. I want people to be able to do stuff, but I want their permissions to be more granular.
Yeah, it would be nice if we could lock some tables down.
Yeah, not an all or nothing. It's the same in cataloging. Yeah. It's a thorn in my side.
All or nothing, yeah.
You know, it shouldn't be all or nothing. It should be more granular, that and recognize that the network or consortium wants to do certain things, and sometimes we're not allowed to do them, which frustrates us. The consortium level staff can do certain things almost as powerful as Bywater, and we're lacking some of those permissions. And then library staff can do their level, you know, based on their role at the library. And then there's, you know, circ staff who are allowed to do, you know, basic circ stuff. There needs to be more, you know, granular permissions, sort of certain things closed off and certain things that don't matter open. So that's a pet peeve of mine with this system.
Yeah.
And I'll say back on the reports discussion, I've successfully crashed our system with reports before. So that's one of the reasons that I don't really like other people poking around in there.
I've done that.
It's not easy to do, but and then we had an issue with bloat. I mean, like if everybody's writing reports, then it's already too hard to find stuff because I've got 800 reports in there. So like if I start letting people go willy-nilly, then like it just becomes impossible. So
if we could each have our own little walled off area, you know, because it's already, as Jason says, I haven't crashed Koha, but I did manage to crash Millennium a couple of times actually, which was the old system before Sierra. But yeah, I mean, I can see some of these people who are eager beavers crashing the system. But I hate limiting people. On the other hand, I'm very democratic that way, but there has to be some safeguards in place. And I hate saying no to people that are really know some SQL and could probably do it better than, I mean, I don't know any SQL, but yeah, we have to have some safeguards in place.
Well, and that's probably working to my advantage. I've got like one person in my consortium that probably could write SQL, but most of my librarians are part-time little old ladies, don't want to bother with it anyway, so it's going to be on me anyways. So not as
that's
not
the
as
thing.
big a concern here.
If somebody is doing something somewhere, I can think of individuals, you know, because they're doing their PhD and they're experimenting and they don't like the way the system works and they think it can do it better. Our heads will be on the line if the system, on the chopping block, if the system goes down. That's my soapbox about permissions. I wish everyone else would get on this soapbox with me, because it shouldn't be a free-for-all.
I can see where you're coming from. We came from a system where everything was locked down and nobody could do anything.
Yeah,
And
I
so when we
wouldn't like
first
that
moved to
either.
Koha,
Yeah.
we had a couple people that got very excited, and we had to kind of shut that down really quick. But the majority of mine are so used to asking for permission for everything that it hasn't occurred to them yet that they can do it on their own. And I'm trying to like keep that mindset going. But we are getting a lot of new people coming in the doors that are very technologically savvy, that are, you know, rubbing their hands together, waiting to dive in. And I'm like, no. So that's going to be our future challenge, is that we've got new people coming in that look at all the possibilities, and they don't understand when I say no. But maybe I'm hard-hearted, but I'm really good at saying no at this point because I don't want to have to fix it.
We empowered our people with Create Lists, which was a Sierra report running thing and global update. But the thing is, they could only do their own items. And they couldn't do the bib stuff, which is what we protect like crazy. So we empowered people to do that stuff. And now we have to say, you know, oh, we bought this great system, you'll be able to do all of this stuff. And now we have to turn around and say, no, sorry, you can't, not unless things change. So
it is a little scary that you can change everybody's stuff, because that's something that we're not used to, because every library kind of has their own setup. And, you know, if you're not careful, you click the wrong thing and you're changing some other library to something that they don't want. And then we had to figure out how that happened. But we would like to see that, especially on a consortium level where you couldn't even see library A's stuff.
Well, we'd like them to see it, but not be able to edit it. We recently discovered that the generic Circ login can delete anyone else's items.
Yeah.
And of course, that's what they did. It wasn't just their own item that they deleted.
Yeah. And that's what
for some reason, you know, probably because they're not used to the system. I don't think it was malicious or anything, but they were deleting somebody else's barcoded items.
Doesn't really work, Steve. So yeah, we have that set up where when we first went live.
Oh, it's a setting that it exists, but it doesn't do anything.
It's there, yeah, but we have this where they cannot edit another library's items. It doesn't apply to deleting, and it's only specific fields. So it hasn't really, we haven't found it to work. Yeah, but the deleting items thing is a real big problem.
So it's like those crosswalk buttons that you push that don't really do anything. They just give you something to do while you're standing.
Well, that was one of the conditions. That was like one of my conditions for going to Koha, that people couldn't touch each other's items. Oh, no, they can't edit them, but they can delete them. Nobody told us that.
I know that when we first started with Koha, we had a big problem with staff not making sure that they were logged into their library. They would just log in and pick something at the top. And so they were checking out books, and it messed things up big time. Bywater had to come in and straighten things out 2 or 3 times. And it was always a staff had just logged into the wrong library. And so that was growing pains when we first made the transition.
Yeah, I come from a time where before the delete all items button was a permission. So I had libraries deleting all the items from the records because they thought that was the delete button. So it improved over time, but it needs more work.
Well, yeah, we've always allowed our libraries to delete old serial records, periodical records, but everything else they're supposed to mark withdrawn. So I think we're going to have to say, don't delete anything, because what they're doing is mistakenly they're deleting somebody else's, or they get distracted. So we've always said, it's fine if you delete the serial records, you know, when you're withdrawing them, instead of having to do a 2-step process. But I think we'll have to say, no, do not delete anything.
Well, and I think that's what we're like a year into Koha, and we have come to the conclusion that we're going back through our consortium circ manual to just rewrite the whole thing, because the rules are different from what they were, and just really thinking about how things affect each other, and it's a big project, but it's definitely, we've finally had a year to figure out, oh, the old rules aren't going to apply, or the way we used to do business just doesn't apply anymore. So that's where we're at right now, is just tearing apart our circ manual and restructuring the way that people do things now. And it's a bit of a challenge because everybody has an opinion.
Oh boy, do they ever.
Everybody going to Portsmouth?
Our state library convention's the same week, so.
So you
Well,
made
I
the
have
right
a-
choice and you're going to Portsmouth, right? It's more important.
I have a retirement at the state that all the network directors, it happens to be the Friday, and there's 2 of our staff going, so. Right, Avery, you're going to bring back all the answers about holds. You're going to get friendly with developers and get them to agree to all these developments. So Avery and Brendan are going, the 2 systems.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Who's going from?
Who's retiring?
Paul Kissman.
Oh, okay. Okay. You know, I figure because it's in our backyard and we just started and people aren't generally going everywhere else in the world, I'm just sending everybody.
Yeah.
And send the whole, it'll probably never happen again. We'll probably like tag team, like, you know, half and half or a third or something like that. But I figured, hell, why not?
I'm not sure that would go down. Yeah, I'm not sure that would go down too well with our membership.
Well, we're not doing anything else with our travel money, and we haven't been for years. So I figure, you know, if we're supposed to be the experts and we're supposed to be able to answer their questions,
yeah,
this is what it is. Besides, they approved the budget, so that's all the permission I need.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll be up in, you know, I don't want to miss the state thing. But
No.
I'll probably never get an opportunity to go again because, as you say, we're in Massachusetts. You guys are in Rhode Island, so it's pretty near.
There's an easy solution to this. Anyone can host the CoHaCon conference. So
oh really?
Be thinking about it. Yep, it rotates every year, and then the membership votes on the proposals that come in. So if you want to host one, we've got. I'm not even on the board
network is the
No.
geographic host of the state conference every year. So Eileen's used to be.
Oh no, we don't even have a central site anymore. We're all remote. But I think Rhode Island, Steve, would be a great place next year.
You know, actually, because I know you're doing a lot of the meetings in a library, right? How many separate rooms do you need?
Generally, we've tried to keep it to 2 tracks, I think. I mean, like,
really?
In Pueblo, we had 2 rooms. Coeur d'Alene, we had 3.
Providence Public just hosted our state library association conference, and they had many rooms, and I was skeptical, but it worked really well. It felt like you were at a conference center. It was kind of crazy. I suppose Boston Public would be the same. We could probably sucker them into it too, but I bet you Providence Public would potentially be interested in it. I can't volunteer them, but I can ask.
I'm pretty sure that usually goes out in December, the call for proposals. So
December. Okay.
Just keep an eye out for that if you're
I'll watch for it, yeah.
All right. Any other discussion? As Bob said, this next month's meeting at the conference will be hybrid, I think. So there will be a Zoom option if you're not coming but have the time available to drop in. That's an option too. So yeah. If there's nothing else, we can wrap this one up, I think. Any other burning questions you want to get out there before?
Just I hope everyone supports any holds development financially.
definitely.
This is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks
Yeah,
very much.
thanks
Yeah,
everybody.
thanks for
Bye.
Nice to
coming,
meet
guys.
new faces.
And we'll see y'all later.
Oh, hey, Jason.